Thank you. Okay, that's awesome. So one of the things that has been really essential to Products That Count since we started is that the speakers come and they talk about something that they've never shared before. And so it's a very exclusive content that they're sharing. We were pretty hush-hush about it for a while, but now actually we'd like to encourage you to tweet about it. So we have a hashtag. And then after the talk, we're going to have some giveaways. Autodesk is also a really strong friend of Products That Count, and they have some really inspiring giveaways to help everybody achieve the impossible. And then we'll do shout-outs, which is for anybody who has something to offer or is looking for something to come in and share that with the group. And then we'll have time for some extra networking. So now Sami. So I met Sami about 5 or 6 years ago. He was already like taking Trulia from zero, well on its way to IPO. And I was trying to start my company, and I emailed him, not really expecting that somebody that busy would respond. And he was like, of course, I'm going to help you. Made a ton of introductions. He was super supportive. And then once he took a Trulia IPO, he was like, well, enough of that. Now I'm going to go row across the Pacific with my wife and see what happens. And he broke the world record by, 30 days? 35 days? If only 15 days. Sorry. I got my numbers wrong. And now he's like on his way to doing like a lot of new things. So, super excited to have him, talk with us tonight. Welcome.
Is the mic? Okay, it's working. All right. Well, thank you so much for the very kind introduction. You mentioned at one point that everyone shares something that they've never ever shared before. So it already made me think that what is it I'm going to share that not even my wife knows. So I have an idea, so I'll tell it. Well, actually, she does know. I'll tell it at the very end. I'm excited to be here, and it actually feels a little bit like coming home because SC, you worked for Trulia, and then you mentioned that the CMO of MyFitnessPal is going to speak. She used to work for Trulia, and our office used to be practically in the same block. So it feels like coming back to my company. So it's fun to be here. What I was going to talk today is the topic is how ordinary people can achieve and build extraordinary things. Because I truly believe that, unlike what people like to say in the Valley, is that you need to be like a superstar special person to be able to do superstar special things. I think there's actually ways in which you can really increase your chances of doing something amazing. It's not that you're born with something special and then many other people who aren't. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'll start with this photo, which is a photo taken in very early August last summer. And it is my wife and I in a rowing boat crossing the Pacific. I'm posing and she's rowing. And like SC mentioned, we rowed across the Pacific Ocean from California to Hawaii, which took about 45 days and 3 hours. And the interesting thing is, neither one of us had ever rowed before until about 6 months before we decided to do this thing. And we didn't really have any ocean or sailing experience either. I grew up on a lake in Finland. My wife grew up in New Hampshire by a lake, but that was pretty much the largest water body that we both had experienced before doing this. And of course, most people who we told about this adventure when we were planning it said, it's impossible, you shouldn't do it, you're going to die, you don't have any experience. And certainly with your lack of rowing experience, even if you can do it, you aren't going to be breaking any kind of records. Well, here's a picture of us within 5 minutes of finishing in Hawaii, Waikiki Beach. And as you heard, not only did we finish happy and healthy and still married, we also broke the speed world record for crossing that section of Pacific. 45 days and 3 hours deck to deck, or dock to dock. Not that we were counting, but we were counting every second. And it was an amazing journey. So everybody told it's impossible, you can't do it, and we made it happen. So I love doing these kinds of things. I really like picking a particular challenge that most people think is completely impossible, and then go and figure it out and make it happen. And on a professional front, I kind of like doing the same thing. So I immigrated to US 2003. I had been in the US before, but really I didn't know anything about the country. And then when I was in the process of starting Trulia with my co-founder, who was from UK, also a European, had never been in the US, I kind of heard the same things as I heard when we were preparing for the role, which is, your plan doesn't make any sense. Real estate industry in particular is extremely closed system, and breaking into it is practically impossible, certainly for someone who comes from outside of the country and doesn't know the industry. And I think we had about 50 angel investors who first said no until the first person said yes, who was Kevin Hards, the founder of Eventbrite, and he wrote us a $25,000 check at the point when we really had nothing to show other than enthusiasm and passion and some sort of a plan, a little bit of a prototype. And then long story short, now, I don't know how big we even are, maybe like 1,000 employees, and went public 2012, 2013, and to some extent have really transformed or changed the real estate industry. But it's another example of, I love these kinds of things where you try to do something that most people think is absolutely impossible, then you just go and figure it out and you make it happen. And it's really, really, the outcome isn't as exciting even as the journey to go and make it happen. And as I mentioned earlier, I certainly don't think personally that I'm a special person in any ways, or that I have talents that any of you would not have. I do think that there's a number of factors that are sort of systematic ways in which you can go about making these kind of amazing things happen. And hopefully I'm going to share 5 stories, and hopefully there's some nuggets that you can use, whether it's about building a company or launching a product or something in between. All right, so 5 stories. So the first one, here is a picture of my wife and her bra, or her back, I guess I should say. So she's sleeping in our rowing boat. So usually the first step that I try to take when there's a new challenge in an area that I know nothing about is to go and speak with as many experts as possible. And before I rowed, that was the same thing I did. In the case of ocean rowing, it's a pretty small population of people you can talk to, but I spoke with about a dozen people who had rowed or crossed some oceans in a rowing boat. And one of the key questions I asked was, how do you sleep and how do you row when there's 2 people in a boat to be able to move as fast as possible and as much distance as possible? And the consistent answer was, you sleep 2 hours and you row 2 hours, and then you sleep 2 hours, you repeat that 24/7. And one of you is sleeping while the other one is rowing. So you keep the boat moving 24/7. And you can't really row more than 2 hours because you get tired. And then the other person can sleep 2 hours to rest. Every single one who had crossed the ocean said that is the way to do it. And then after about a week, you start hallucinating and all kinds of fun stuff happens because you're just on all the time. And so then I spoke with a bunch of sleep experts as well. In fact, guys from the founders of Zero to some others, and they said, well, you really shouldn't you shouldn't have more than 3 sections a day, because otherwise your circadian rhythm gets completely messed up, and maybe you can do 3 sections a day. So we thought we would start with about 4 to 6 hour stretches, and try to go from there. So that was our plan going into the row. So first week of June, when we pushed off, first day we decided to row like as long as we could, and the idea was we left 7 a.m. in the morning, and we would row until 10 p.m., and then one of us would go and sleep. and then the other one would continue another 6 hours and then rotate that kind of a 6-hour cycle. Well, we rode from 7 until 11 p.m., so that is 16 hours, I guess. And then the weather was just, so it got dark by 11 p.m. We were a little tired, and the waves started picking up, and it was ridiculously scary. First of all, I have to say that we had only slept in a boat twice overnight before that. And those 2 nights, the boat was anchored into a yacht in Marina. So this was the first night out in the ocean, and the waves were picking up like crazy, and we figured it's way too dangerous for one of us to be alone on the deck. And the wind was picking up so much that if one of us stopped rowing, we were looking at our GPS, we were actually moving backwards. So we decided to throw our para anchor into the water, which just looks like a parachute, and then just go and sleep for 5 or 6 hours. And wait until like 5 a.m. in the morning and see if the weather gets better and we can actually continue rowing. So that's what we did the first night. And miraculously, the weather was way better by 5 a.m. in the morning. So we continued rowing. And what ended up happening, we repeated this for 3 days. The weather, every time this, after the sunset, the waves were just like 2 or 3 story buildings crashing over the boat, and there was no way one of us would be on the deck alone. And then we slept 5 or 6 hours together and then continued rowing for 16, 17 hours non-stop. And so after 3 days, we were just absolutely amazed because we were super rested after each of the nights that we had slept 5 or 6 hours. It felt like it was a new day. We were recovered. And we were both able to row 16 hours a day, as opposed to if you're on 2 on 2 off, you end up rowing only 12 hours a day. We also realized that when we only slept once, we only had to clean our bodies once, so there was only like one transitioning. So we said, why would we ever go back to this 2 on 2 off? Let's just continue. We basically started an 18 hours on, 6 hours off. And then we staggered it so that one of us was sleeping for 6 hours and the other one was rowing that 6 hours. So 12 hours at the same time and then 6 hours solo. So we accidentally discovered a completely new way of rowing in an ocean rowing boat as a 2-person team. And we think this is one of the key reasons why we're able to move so fast and get so far and have such a high average speed. And it turns out that your body starts producing growth hormone after about 90 minutes of sleeping. And growth hormone is the most powerful way of sort of recovering and rebuilding your body. If you don't get growth hormone, just forget about it. You exercise and your body just starts sort of falling apart. And if you sleep 2 hours and you wash yourself and then you try to fall asleep, you barely get to that deep stage when your body starts producing growth hormone. So that's probably another hormonal reason that it helped us. So what's my first lesson in the story? Like, if you want to accomplish something truly extraordinary, experimentation, in my experience, is the only way to figure out something absolutely transformative. If you speak with the experts, I used to work for McKinsey as a consultant many, many years ago, and it's an amazing firm, and they have an amazing amount of knowledge, but no transformative company or product was ever built by McKinsey consultants or with their help. And if you think of startups here, especially here in the Valley, like, how do 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds go and disrupt entire industries? It's bunch of experimentation through which you figure out 10x ways to improve things. It's useful to talk to experts, especially if you have zero experience in some industry or area. But there's no breakthroughs that come through speaking with people who know the area. That's the first story. Experimentation, not experts. And by the way, a lot of those crazy discoveries that we found out during the Trulia years, they didn't come from interviewing experts. It was always experimentation, and then we stumbled on something that was completely unexpected. So the second one, are there any triathletes here in the room? Like anyone's 1, 2, so other 3, okay, 3, 4. So all the triathletes in the room know that every triathlete wants to show pictures of themselves in spandex. And I am no different. So here's my moment of glory. This is a photo of me when I won the World Championships in my age group at the half Ironman distance a couple of years ago. And once I reached that level in triathlon, a lot of people asked me and sort of like, oh wow, like you must be so gifted, and that must have been like such an overnight amazing accomplishment, and how is this possible? And the interesting part of this whole thing is that I discovered triathlon in 2004, and I won the World Championships in my age group 2011. And the secret to getting that far is actually very, very kind of a boring and mundane thing. And the answer to me was the process of continuous improvement. So I give you a very practical example. Every time that I did a race, and I probably did 5-6 races each year, so over 7 years, that's say 42 races. I wrote down 3 things that I learned that I could improve going forward. So whether I won or was second or third or 26th, that was never the goal or focus for me. Every time I sat down, like, okay, that was interesting. What are the 3 things that I can learn from this, and how can I improve? And, if you do 42 races, you do 3 new discoveries each time. So 3 times 42 is 126. So suddenly I had 126 ways to improve my performance. And over 7 years, if you go back and look at my results, it's kind of like a linear path where there was nothing overnight. It was like a gradual, tiny improvements month after month, quarter after quarter, and year after year. And I'm sure all of you know the power of compounded returns, whether it's investing or interest. But I think a lot of people don't realize that in terms of learning and discoveries, exactly the same thing can be applied. And especially in the Silicon Valley, there's a crazy amount of focus on like, people talk about like super smart. Someone's like so high IQ and super smart. And I've always found that a team that has this kind of a continuous learning and a growth mindset outperforms any high IQ bunch of smart people sitting in a circle and thinking that they're very smart. Because if you think of the compounded returns, in just like a few months' time, when you just tiny little improvements and learnings all the time, you completely outperform someone or a team that just thinks they're very smart and they have the answers. So if you want to accomplish extraordinary things, it's amazing how far you can get in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years if you have this continuous path of learning and improving. So that's the second story. Third story, this is a picture of me on a Concept 2, which was one of the key training tools, preparation tools for the row. And I can tell you that after we finished, I haven't really used the Concept 2. And I was just having a walking meeting before coming here, and this guy was telling me how he loves rowing and he has a Concept 2 at home, and he was so proud. I said, I have one too, but I haven't touched it since May of last year. But what we're doing here, so I'm exhaling and inhaling through a tube to measure oxygen that I'm using, and then carbon dioxide and oxygen that I'm exhaling. And the reason I'm measuring that is that from the exchange ratio of how much oxygen using, how much carbon dioxide is coming out, you can actually calculate what percentage of your energy is coming from fats and what percentage is coming from carbohydrates, so-called substrate utilization. And the reason we were measuring that was we knew that it's one of the key performance factors for us. Turns out in our bodies we have a couple of thousand calories worth of carbohydrates stored in the form of glycogen in the muscles or liver. So call it 2 or 3 hours worth of energy. So you can exercise for 2 or 3 hours with that fuel tank that you have. But the amount of fat we have, even if you're the leanest person, you can exercise for 2 to 3 days non-stop. And we knew that to be able to row 12 hours, maybe 18 hours a day, we have to be able to become very good fat burners. Otherwise, we're sucking sugar and gels all the time and we might bonk. And bonking in the middle of Pacific, when there's no aid stations or gas stations, is not a really good thing to happen. So we measured this consistently during our preparation. And I'm overgeneralizing, but I would say that if I would put any of you or most of you on a rowing erg and said, go at the steady pace, you would probably be using 60 to 75% of the energy that you're using for the work coming from carbohydrates, and maybe 20-25% fat. So through measuring and focusing on improving that aspect, I was able to get to 95% fat and 5% carbohydrates, which meant I could basically keep rowing indefinitely at a pretty solid pace and effort without running out of energy. And that was actually the only reason we were able to row 18 hours non-stop, and we maybe ate 2 times a day. 18 hours just rowing and no bunking, nothing. The other example that I have is I'm kind of obsessed with data. So during the row, this is kind of a logbook, and there's some stuff that I was scribbling there every day. And one of the key things that we had to figure out was, given the wind angle, given the direction where we wanted to go, and given the work rate that we could put in, what's the optimal angle that we should aim to maximize our speed towards Hawaii without wasting too much energy. And then every day I was trying to calculate. There were many other less useful things that I was calculating, because using brain, I was trying to keep my brain alive. So one of my favorite calculations, which really pissed off my wife, because I was trying to do the calculation aloud, was we started seeing planes flying over us. So given the curvature of Earth, I was trying to figure out how far the plane can be from our boat that I can still see it. And it took like 2 hours with the fatigued brain trying to do that calculation, but it was fun. But the point that I have here is, if you want to accomplish something truly extraordinary, you really have to figure out what are the key elements and factors to get you where you want to go, and then you just have to measure them consistently. And there's just so many examples from my past experiences where just the act of measuring brings so much focus to trying to then improve that. And unless you know what are the contributors that push you towards where you want to go, it's very impossible to stay on the right track. And when you combine that continuous growth mindset and learning, and then what are the factors pushing you there, it's amazing what happens over some period of time when you just focus on those things. So measure everything that matters. So the fourth story actually starts with a picture of the extremely delicious food. This is what I was eating 45 days for lunch, because I ate the same stuff every single day. This is, it's dehydrated beef, the gray stuff, and then dehydrated vegetables, some olives, some bunch of olive oil, mixed with water coming from our desalinator, because we didn't carry water, so we used solar panels and then desalinator that was powered with the solar power to generate water from the ocean water. But the reason I have that picture is first 2 days, I was cooking water, and you can imagine in a, shaky little rowing boat, you have like a camp stove and gas and stuff, and it takes like 15, 20 minutes to try to boil the water. And then you mix, and then this dehydrated beef and vegetables becomes like a stew, and it's very delicious. But I kind of accidentally realized that however it was dehydrated, I didn't need boiling or hot water. The lukewarm water that was coming out of the desalinator was completely fine. And it was very delicious. And so I just immediately stopped doing that. So suddenly I saved 2 times 10 or 15 minutes of my time, which was 20 or 30 minutes a day of extra time for myself. Another example was breakfast I used when I woke up. I ate my breakfast, which was like 10 or 15 minutes, and then started rowing. But then after a couple of days, I was like, I'm just going to start rowing. And then my breakfast was usually tuna from a pouch or salmon and then macadamia nuts. So I was rowing and eating it kind of at the same time, which was another 10 minutes. So suddenly I had 40 minutes of extra time. And for us, there were really only 2 things that we wanted to focus on the boat, which really sounds kind of boring for 45 days. It was either sleeping or rowing, and then a bunch of fixing stuff because everything basically broke. But sleeping or rowing. And I'll tell the other story why I have this pie chart here. So this is something I did roughly once a year during the Trulia years. And it wasn't my own discovery. It was one of my mentors who said, hey, you should do an inventory of your own time. So once a year, I took 7 or 8 days, about a week, and I wrote down in 15-minute increments how exactly I used my time. What did I use it for? What was the perceived impact? And a couple of other things. 15 minutes of email, 45-minute meeting, 30 minutes driving to Sand Hill Road, and 45 minutes driving to Sand Hill Road, trying to raise money, or whatever it was. And went through how I used my time over 7 days. And it's amazingly eye-opening to realize how much crap and waste accumulates to your time or your time use. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that if you want to accomplish something truly extraordinary, you have to and you can cut most of the waste that doesn't really take you towards the extraordinary goal that you're trying to accomplish. So literally, it's 90% of crap. And one question I heard from a lot of Trulia team members oftentimes I have no idea how you're making, you win triathlons all over the world, you're building this company, we have 500 employees, and where do you find that time? And you even just get married, how is that possible? And I think one of the key things was I just stopped doing a lot of things that other people do. Unfortunately, a lot of things that I probably should not have stopped doing. I never went to movies. I didn't read newspapers. Unfortunately, my social life outside of work and my spouse was kind of zero. I'm not trying to say that you should make your life super, super simple, but the thing is 90% of things that most people use their time is usually complete waste. And it's a personal choice that you should have relaxation and that sort of time, whatever it is that you want to use your time, but it is very easy to waste so much time that is not taking you towards whatever that extraordinary goal is, whether it's rowing to Hawaii or building a company or building a product. And by the way, I have an opposite example of this as well, because when I left my operational role at Trulia and I didn't have a North Star or specific thing I wanted to accomplish, I felt ridiculously busy and stressed out. And all my time was gone. I was I don't even have a freaking job. I was grocery shopping an hour and a half each day, going to grocery stores. I never went to a store when I didn't have the time. I simply didn't go. Food was delivered to my house or whatever. All that 24/7 I was able to fill with all kinds of crap. And I felt stressed and I felt I have no time to do anything. And I didn't even have a job. So whatever time you have, it gets filled unless you do this exercise of cutting crap out. So stop doing 90% of things. And the fifth story, well, first of all, this was my office for 2 months last summer. This is what the deck looked like. And I guess one thing to highlight here is we had a rule that nothing wet should go into our cabin. And well, it turns out when you're out in the Pacific Ocean, and by the way, it wasn't really sunny for the most part at all, nothing dries. So like as we went further and further, pretty much anything and everything we had to be kept on the deck. So it really looks like pretty much like any homeless shelter station in San Francisco you walk, there's like all stuff, whether you eat, your clothes, all stuff is out there, including, let's see if you can see, yeah, I guess our bathroom is there as well. It's a little blue bucket. So we took about 1 million oar strokes each, myself and my wife, from California to Hawaii. 1 million oar strokes. And I can honestly tell that for 1 million times I felt discomfort and pain to get there. Like physically there was not that much enjoyment in the process. It was painful in some way every time I took an oar stroke. And while I'm a huge believer that if you want to accomplish something truly extraordinary, I think you need two things. You need sense of purpose, that you're doing it for purpose. And sense of purpose, the other way of saying it is, it's like it's your passion. It just feels like this is super meaningful. It's your North Star. I'm doing this for a reason. And then two is, believable strategies. You believe that there is a way to get there. If you have those two things, I think that for the most part, you can accomplish anything. But even with those two, the daily grind is usually rather painful. And no matter what amount of passion and purpose you have, 99% of the time is usually spent in a kind of like, holy shit, like this is really hard work. And you can't be thinking about the purpose all the time. And one of the questions that I've heard from a lot of people related to our role was that, like what were you dreaming about? Like what did you think, what did you want to have when you finished? Like, were you thinking about like what kind of hotel room you're gonna have, or what you're gonna eat, or like what were you dreaming about when you were rowing? And honestly, the easiest way to mentally fall apart, regardless of your passion and purpose, and you know how you get there, you just take 1 million oar strokes. The easiest way to fall apart is to start dreaming about some cool thing. It's like you're building a company. The moment you have hard work, like, I'm going to be dreaming about IPO or making so much money, or whatever it is that the little gold something shiny is, that's when you truly start falling apart. Because very quickly your brain is just that dream is gonna disappear. And when that disappears, the pain is twice or 10 times as painful. The discovery that I've had myself is there's one way to escape all that. And it's like the ultimate escape. When going really gets tough, physically or emotionally, once you sort of accept and embrace that, it's like the ultimate escape. And I did this many times during our row. It was like, my ass is hurting, my hands are hurting, my shoulder is hurting. And then you just go, I don't know, how many of you do mindfulness meditation or something like, okay, so you probably have experienced that. You sort of embrace and say, wow, I feel the pain and this is amazing. Like, my ass is hurting, and in fact, it's probably I've lost the skin already. And you embrace it. Once you get inside of it, like nothing kills you. Like absolutely nothing can stop you. And that's been a big discovery for me, that no amount of purpose and passion will carry you over the hard moments. But the moment you embrace it, it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like, this is it. This is happening right now. And you're inside of it. I feel that it's almost like a superpower. So that's my fifth story. And in order to achieve something extraordinary, you have to embrace the pain and the process. No matter how much someone tells you that if you have passion, you can get anywhere. It's still painful. Okay, so you asked to tell a story that really nobody has heard. So I'll tell you one story, which is a little embarrassing. Actually, I'll tell you the context and background. So, first of all, my wife's 4 or 5 weeks from delivering our first baby. Hopefully, all goes well. We went into the row thinking we'll never, ever have kids. Like, life is too good. Like, why would you want to mess it up with, like, crying freaking babies? There's way more better things to do in life. And we were both very happy about the decision. It felt really good. And about 8 days into the row, I started thinking, like literally my thought in my head was, wow, like, is this all there is to life? Rowing fucking oceans? Like, there has to be something greater. Like, there has to be, like, I want to have a family. And then I shared it with my wife, and she said, well, I was thinking about exactly the same. So it happened within like a 24-hour window. We're both like, okay, we want to have kids. So the embarrassing part of the story is then we were like, well, we should probably try it on the boat. So fortunately we have a satellite phone. So my wife texted to her friend, why don't you go and download Max Levchin's fertility app, Glow, right? No, what's the name of it? Anyway, so the fertility app. So her friend downloaded it, and then she was sending whatever data you need to send. And she was tracking and then texting us back the dates when we should be trying. Anyway, long story short, she's pregnant. So that's my very personal and secret story that I haven't really told you. So it wasn't all that painful. It was fun too. So I think maybe if you have questions, we'll spend 10-15 minutes. And
why this possible?
The role specifically? Well, there were two reasons. One was we really wanted to raise awareness around the dangers of sugar. So we did this entire row with no sugar, no processed carbohydrates. The question is, why didn't we bike ride or walk along Embarcadero and raise awareness around the dangers of sugar when we went to row across the Pacific? So the inspiration to me came from this book, Unbroken, written by Laura Hillebrand. And I'm pretty sure at least 5% of them, who has read Unbroken? Okay, so 5, 6. So coincidentally, it was made to a movie as well recently by Angelina Jolie. The movie wasn't very good. The book is amazing. There's like 14,000 reviews on Amazon, average 5.0 stars or something. It was very inspirational, and it's about this Second World War Air Force guy who was shot down above Pacific, came down and floated in his life raft, and then became a prisoner of war in Japan. It's a super inspirational story. But the description of the Pacific Ocean and the wilderness was just so touching that I said, I want to experience that wilderness once in my lifetime. So that's where the inspiration came. So I knew that I want to cross the Pacific, experience the wilderness, human-powered. So I considered swimming. I thought it's way too dangerous. Kayaking, I thought we can die as well. So the next one on the list was rowing. So that's kind of how it came about. And by the way, those of you who have not read the book, don't worry. Nobody will get the inspiration to row the ocean. Like, it's a good and safe book to read. Yes, please.
So how did you convince your wife?
How did I
convince your wife?
Yeah, so how did I convince my wife? So I have to admit that I honestly think that of all the accomplishments or tough challenges I've had in my life, the biggest accomplishment is convincing my wife to row the Pacific with me. And I'm very, very proud of it. So how did I convince? Well, turns out I actually asked her first. She said, no freaking way. If you want to do something crazy. Let's go and run the mountain, run the trail, Pacific Crest or something. It's much more interesting. I'm not going to do it. So then I asked another friend, who's also a founder of a company and kind of a rower from the East Coast, and he said he'll do it. And then for 2 weeks we were planning, and at that point my wife said, yes, you are actually doing, which was funny to me because I said, well, I'm not the kind of person who talks because I actually make shit happen. So I am going to do this. And then at that point, I think she felt that it's too big of a life experience to experience solo. And we've done a lot of all kinds of stuff. So, and I'm happy she changed her mind. So, yes, please.
I love the principles in Ori. An example from Trulia. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So the question was, can I give examples from Trulia, what we measured and what kind of experimentation led to some kind of discoveries? So measuring, we measured like a lot of KPIs, but I'll give you examples. Maybe something that's not so commonly done. So one of the things I started when we were only 5 people was an employee happiness index. So we send a Survey Monkey, kind of a simple survey out first every week, then every month, and then later every quarterly, and we call it the Pulse survey. Why? Because, we always thought the only real asset that we have in a company is the brains and the talents of the team. So that was one we felt a key factor to measure. If our team isn't happy, if they don't know what they're supposed to work, if they don't feel like they have the autonomy to make decisions, like something's wrong. So we have to measure that. And a lot of people don't measure that kind of thing. So that was one thing we started when we were 5 people. And I'm hoping that it's still some variation of that is measured. So that's one example. Then, of course, on a kind of a product side, you have much more traditional metrics, whether that's exit rates and, different things and business metrics, churn and acquisition costs and that sort of things, which are more traditional. But, I just always try to think, what is it that contributes to our success? And one, obviously, on the people side is, okay, people are important. So what do you measure? Like, it's like NPS. Would I recommend this place to my friends? How happy am I when I come to work every day? And then alignment, like, do I know what I'm doing, why I'm doing, and how it contributes to company success? So we ask that kind of questions on measuring side. So that's measuring. And then in terms of experimentation, one kind of funny example is like now mobile is everything, but when like iPhone launched, we've always tried to give at least some amount of time or very structured innovation days and innovation weeks. Like our iPhone app, like we did not jump into mobile like, oh yeah, there's this Apple new thing launching. This is going to be we need to invest very heavily. It was like one guy over the weekend whipped up the iPhone app, because we sort of allowed and encouraged random experimentation like that. Early days, there was a kind of a random stumble in that, immediately after we launched, we were sued by the real estate companies of cease and desist letters, meaning you should take all the content out. So we had a search engine with no search results, which is kind of a tough place to be when you've raised money and said, we're going to build a real estate search engine. You launch and then you have a Google search results with no search results kind of thing. So we sort of accidentally stumbled a completely different business model, how to go about partnering with the real estate industry by just experimentation. So not sure if that's helpful, but to be open to try a lot of things as opposed to trying to, for example, speak to experts and have long-term plans. In a rapidly changing environment, especially if you're trying to do something extraordinary that others haven't done, it's absolutely impossible to plan even like 18 months ahead of time. Okay, one more question. There will have been arms. Yes, please. The question was, what was my training technique to go from carbohydrates to burning fat? There are a number of factors, but only one thing will completely change the way your body utilizes different substrates. That's your diet, not the exercise. Can we have one more? This was fast. One more? Okay. So one.
Some next impossible figure you have? You have one.
I do have. That's the topic of my next talk. Yeah.
Difficult.
I'm not going to tell. It's the topic of my... Okay, one more.
How much does form?
Sisu? Yeah. Okay.
And what would you say don't have that?
How many of you know what's Sisu? Oh, there's one, two, maybe a couple. So there's actually a Wikipedia page for Sisu, but it is a Finnish word that has no translation in practically any other language, and is something around perseverance or something. In Finland, it's a part of the culture that you will basically keep hitting the rock stone wall until it falls apart, and you won't give up. So the Sisu is something like that. I don't know. I truly think that everyone should think that it is not what they were born with, that what is it and how can they develop some of those skills and traits. There's way too much emphasis on like talent or IQ or something that you're kind of born with. The fact is that whether it's in athletics or business, absolutely amazing things are possible by almost anyone. And that, I think that was what I was trying to communicate with the entire presentation.
Sami, thank you.
Okay, thank you.